I'm sorry I wasn't nice about the history of U.S.-Chinese, but it never came up.
There are people out there who will believe, if they hear certain words, they will instantly come to the conclusion that the United States was a colonial power in the same sense that Europe was.
I want to recommend, Vivek knows about this, I'm sure, the Ibis trilogy. I recommend this to everybody because this is all about the opium trade. The action in the novel starts in 1838, just on the eve of the first Opium War. The hero is a mixed race American from Baltimore. And it takes you through the first Opium War and the aftermath and so forth. And there is just no question that New England in particular thrived from the China trade on the coattails of the Royal Navy. And we were jackal imperialists. We were up to our nose in that stuff. And here's the thing. The Chinese, they know their own history, but they look at the American Navy. They look at it in Southeast Asia. And what do they see? They see the Spanish and the Portuguese and then the Dutch and the British and the French navies down there that have used that part of the world as a staging ground for assaults against the Chinese mainland for 200 years. Can I just make one or two other small points? During the Cold War, during the early years of the Cold War, after Sputnik, okay, in the PSYOP that the United States created, it was obviously Soviet focused, but there were lots and lots of targets in China. Because as you said, monolithic communism, we assumed that People's Republic was a subordinate ally of the Soviet Union and would do everything that it said. We had on station at all times 4 nuclear-capable aircraft that were able to drop nuclear weapons on China before 1969, before Lop Nor, before the Chinese had an answer. If you get a Chinese guy in their cuffs who knows the history, the humiliation of the United States being able to threaten China with nuclear weapons, and China had no means of responding, right? That still gnaws at them. They think we humiliated them by doing that. And of course we did. We didn't think of it that way. That still gnaws at them.
Wow, we could get into so many topics.
We didn't even mention that today Russia invaded Europe.
Why? Nothing to do with China.
No, nothing to do with China, but it's such big news. No, it's not being covered at all in the U.S.
Hardly, yeah.
It's quite phenomenal.
Nobody gives a shit about the rest of the world, really.
We are banking on being able to get through that somehow.
By the way, Vivek, but you know this already. If the United States can deter a Chinese attack and Chinese pressure on Taiwan, and if it can create a joint naval command with Japan, which should be done immediately, it's going to push Chinese energies, wolf warrior energies, elsewhere. The Chinese have been probing in India. India is weak. The Chinese mind punches a couple of soldiers up in the mountains, and India is weak. I would be worried about more coming from the Chinese if I were an Indian. They can't go and screw the Soviets, the Russians yet, because they need them still for some things. But if you look around the borders of China, where the pressure points are, if they can't go into Taiwan and they can't go elsewhere in Southeast Asia right now without starting a war, they're going to go elsewhere. They're going to come toward India.
I completely agree with you. They've been trying that for the last couple of years. And yeah, we don't quite have the military strength that China has because we've neglected to build our military strength over the years. That's been a major miss out over the last 30 years. That's something that I think this Indian government recognizes that, and let's see how things go. But the problem in India is, much like the US, is that the politics tends to come in the way of what might be really necessary military buildup, because India is so chaotic.
Yeah.
And it's got so many different voices that it's not easy to get a consensus on this. And it's actually taken only wars to get a consensus. And you've had a consensus during those wars for maybe 15 days or 20 days or 1 month or the month after.
Yeah.
But then after that, we go back to our nice little chaotic ways.
India really worries me, though. And Americans worry me. Try to imagine a completely muscle-bound in the brain pseudo-strategist in America thinking about how to deal with China, okay? You remember back in 1968 or one of the early James Bond movies, the plot of the movie was that the Chinese, using submarine-launched ballistic missiles, because if you can't identify the source of an attack, you can't deter it. The Chinese are trying to trick the Soviets and the Americans into a war that would destroy the United States and the Soviet Union and leave China to be. Well, that's the same scenario now, but the idea is to maneuver China and India into a nuclear war, kill all of these extraneous people, and then that solves our problem. There are people who are actually starting to think like that in private. This is very, very evil.
Why India? Why do
Because
why would
India-
Americans even consider India?
India has nuclear weapons. It would be the fodder that would rain nuclear missiles down on China and reduce its threat. The two countries would destroy each other, and then the threat to the United States would
I
diminish.
mean, this is like right,
but
not
there are people-
actually in the U.S. policy community.
They're not in the policy community. They're in the extremities of some of the in the military services.
Wow.
Dear
Let's hope
God.
they stay at the extremities of.
But this the fact that people have thought like this and have been willing to say it in private is terrifying. You know?
Saying it in private, in what context? You want people to be speculating and having ideas in private that, are quickly shot down. You don't want people to be totally stifled in the military so they can never voice any
Right.
crazy
Well,
idea.
that's right. I'm not saying this is going to become national policy or anything like that in the next.
As long as it never gets anywhere near anyone.
I don't, probably not. But it's the tailwind of the zeitgeist. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean.
The
I mean,
irrationality, the lava flows of irrationality now in the United States, and
it's astonishing to see. It's astonishing to see. It's just wafting across the Atlantic, the crazy, and it's really scary. I mean, I think Biden is very sane and dignified, and every time he speaks in that slow, reassuring way, I'm very, very glad he's there, and Trump isn't. But 75 million people voted for crazy.
And of the 75 million who voted for crazy, probably 30 or 40 still think that the election was stolen, and they think we're in the early stages of a civil war.
Well,
and by the way, the woke left is maybe
they're nuts.
Less violent, but they're no less illiberal.
They're absolutely nuts, and everyone hates them, and they're completely unable to see themselves as others see them.
Yeah, but here's the thing: if you drop a nickel from the sky on any place in America, just sort of random, and then you go there to where the nickel lands, and you go talk to people, what you'll find is that Americans in general are just as sober and moderate and centrist as they ever were, and that compromise is not a dirty word. It's really only in the activist wings of the parties that you find these lunatics. But we now have a clickbait-driven media that magnifies the extremes and the cacophony, the dialectic between the extremes. And so you have to ask yourself, what really matters politically? What is true about the way that Americans think, or what is perceived via the media about how Americans think? Those are two different things right now. And this is a subject that I ruminate on, but I have not figured out.
So you're coming back. You're coming back, Adam, because this is a topic that we absolutely love. Right, Claire?
This is our raison d'etre.
This is us.
If we can just figure out how to get people to click on us instead of the clickbait.
Yeah, well, good luck with that one. I've come to the conclusion that things are so nuts right now. Gornish McGornish. I'll let Claire translate.
It's how do you translate that? It's
nothing with nothing. It's very
it's like
hard. It's hard.
Like nonsense upon nonsense. It's
useless.
Yeah.
Useless.
Oh, you know what? Speaking of nonsense upon nonsense, I ran into, just from reading, my favorite quote of the last 24 hours. Anyway, this is some guy named Ferenc Molnar, some Hungarian Jew in the middle of the interwar period, said the following about maybe Mussolini, some early fascist pre-World War II personality. He said, and this fits Donald Trump so well. He said, he was such a liar that his lies were not even the opposite. I just have to think about it. He was such a liar that his lies were not not even the opposite of the truth.
Yep.
I just love it.
Well, it does suggest that maybe Trump isn't the first person in history to be so hallucinogenic in his.
Of course not.
No, there were quite a few before him.
He was the first person in American history.
First American president, and I think the first. I don't think there's been a Westerner who has had Trump's quality of being so goofily.
Well, in Italy, you had this guy Silvio Berlusconi.
I was just going to say,
Berlusconi,
go back before. There was also Mussolini. I mean, let's go back a little bit.
But,
it's absolutely horrible that Italy actually birthed two of them. Really think about it, Mussolini and Berlusconi.
Well, Italy is a young country, as you know.
It is.
You know what I heard from
it's a young democracy.
Alessandro Pattuino from Milano, who was a friend of mine who spent 25 years in Shanghai and who's now in Singapore. He told me something I wasn't aware of. And this comes right out of Book 8 of the Republic, where Socrates is talking about disrespect for law, that people are accused and convicted of crimes, but they're still walking around on the street. So I didn't know that Berlusconi was ordered to jail, but he didn't go. And he's still walking around and nobody does anything. I mean, this comes right out of Book 8 of the Republic. It's just stunning.
Well,
that
sounds
that
like
I
a
think
long
No, I
local
think he was
tradition.
I think he was under house arrest. I think that's where he did his time. That's what I believe, but I'd have to go and check that. I'm not entirely sure,
Well-
but that's what I think. And then he went off to France, and that's where he was
Without
during
asking permission.
COVID, to his villa in France. But that's
quite a guy.
yeah, yeah. So Adam, we got to get you back, okay? And there are quite a few topics that we can all talk about.
Why don't we get you back on a topic about which you are an expert?
Well, name one. I mean, there are only a couple. We could talk about the Middle East, but it makes me insane. But what I'd like to talk about really is spectacle and literacy.
Let's talk about that.
It's a little esoteric.
No,
I'd like to
it's right up
maybe-
our alley. Right up our alley.
No, we love
And it's
that.
important.
We could talk about that. That's what I'm kind of working on, thinking about.
Yeah.
I am going to try to finish this book that kind of, it's like the everything bagel explanation for American dysfunction, which is also partly Western dysfunction.
Yep.
When I
let's
say
do it.
everything bagel, all know what I mean? Probably
Yes.
not.
I do.
Vivek,
Do you know what?
everything bagel is? When you go and you buy a bagel, you can say, I want onions on it, or I want sesame seeds, or I want poppy seeds, or I want whatever. But if you say an everything bagel, it means you want it all on the same bagel. So it means a synoptic 360-degree, syncretic.
It
attempt
means
to-
quite a complicated bagel.
yeah, complicated.
Really
Yummy,
complicated.
yummy.
Actually, Vivek, do you know what a bagel is?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I
Yes,
don't
I
even
do.
like bagels,
Vivek,
but-
just out of curiosity, have they got bagels in India?
Yeah, there's a couple of stores that sell them now.
That sell them now. Okay.
Yeah, there's an American chain that's come down.
Yeah.
Sounds very con market.
We've got bagels.
Ah,
here.
no, it's not Khan Market. My daughter's definitely not Khan Market.
We got bagels here, but they've been Italianized. I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry.
Well, that's
It's sort of
good.
like, pizza in the States. It's the same concept.
You know, for years, I said the French are not going to be able to master cheesecake. They just can't get their heads around it. And now they've got
Mastered
cheesecake
it.
down pat. And they still haven't got bagels, but there's going to be some kind of breakthrough soon.
Oh, they will.
Because
They will.
it-
They will.
it's not an inscrutable technology.
Well, that makes up for the fact that in the past 15 or 20 years, the French have actually been able to produce bad wine. Never produced bad wine before, but lately there's some actually bad French wine.
What are you thinking of?
It
Particular?
comes in the if you go to the airport, near the airport, it comes in the wax containers.
Okay, but you
It's
shouldn't
really
be buying.
downscale stuff. It's awful.
We
But
haven't
you
seen that
shouldn't- you
here
don't-
in
yeah, no,
actual
you-
France
Well,
proper.
not in Paris, maybe, but just awful.
This is an export only product.
Probably, or idiots who are stuck at airports product. Yeah. It was genuinely bad. And I just thought the French, would never, on principle, would never do that. But they,
I would have
The
thought so
Tetra
too.
Pak. It's the Tetra Pak. No, we've got it here as well, but it's the same thing. We just use it for cooking.
Italy is another country I haven't spent nearly as much time in as I would
Oh,
like. I've only been
come,
to Italy
Adam.
once.
You should see where I live. You
And
got to
so-
come.
Well, I
Where
would
do
love
you
to-
live? I mean, I know you live in
Siena.
Siena. But tell me about where you live. Yeah, you
Very,
said,
very
"Come see what I-
close.
what I-"
Behind my house, I've got the Francigena Way. Okay, so this is the old road, the pilgrimage route that takes you right through. I'm surrounded by hills, and right now they're verdant green. It's spectacular, spectacular. And many times I've thought, okay, maybe I should just go back to Canada because politically it's an impossible country. But then I look around me here in Tuscany and I just, I can't do it because it's just, I drive home from university, I stop, I can look out into the hills. There's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful hillside. It's something you got to see, Claire. So
Well, all I
you're
can
invited
say-
as well.
My family's Italian. I have seen Tuscany. It's incredibly beautiful.
Oh,
You're just
there
walking
you go.
right into a Renaissance painting.
It doesn't look real.
All I can say is if somebody
It doesn't
can
look real.
get invited, I'll be there.
Oh no,
You
Adam,
think your
come,
travel is
come,
ever
come.
going to recover? You think the world is ever going to recover?
Yeah, I do. I think it'll recover. I don't know how long it's going to take, but I think it's going to recover. Unless we have another zoonotic disease. By the way, one of the things, I wrote a proprietary study for the Japanese government recently. I do it every 4 years. And one of the things that I suggested, Prime Minister Suga will be here in the United States, will be here in Washington on the 8th of April for a 3-day visit. That's soon. So one of the things I suggested he consider is a suggestion to the US government, to the Biden administration, that Japan and the United States co-chair an international effort to prevent and manage zoonotic disease. because I think we're very likely at the beginning of a period where zoonotic disease is going to become, so far we've had SARS and COVID-19, but I think that's just the beginning unless this invasion of marginal areas releasing nasty things that have been lying in the ground for 10 million years, unless we stop violating the de facto separation between civilization and nature, we're going to have more of these. There are a lot of things you can do to mitigate the frequency and the damage that these zoonotic diseases cause. You can see what kind of catastrophes they cause, right? We can do a lot more than we're doing now, and I think Japan and the United States should co-chair an international effort to do what is possible to do. And that would be an area, for example, where the Chinese would be resistant at first, because they promised after SARS to shut down these wet markets and so forth, and they didn't do it. Now there's more pressure, and there are more countries involved, and it's better understood what the dynamic is. But so I think that's an area where there's a lot of good things could be done. I mean, basically, the Western institutions were like a dumpster fire during COVID, but the medical research and non-governmental institutions actually did pretty well.
They did brilliantly, but
I think we need to capitalize on that and help
our strengths,
advance it. And that's one way to do it, is to create a project, a big, a stretch idea, right?
What idea?
Zoonotic disease. And so I hope the Japanese took the suggestion seriously, and they will discuss it with us Americans, because we'd never think of something like by ourselves. No, seriously, one of the things that's happened, the Chinese talk about rectification of names, how people start using language, but they're not using language in the way that, it's supposed to be used. The word bold, when a politician uses the word bold in the United States right now, it's a totally transformed meaning of the word. When the Democrats talk about bold, they mean bigger government throwing money at problems. Anything but thinking about it, all right? Nobody in either major party has actually had an actual idea. No one has articulated a theory of the case of what's the matter.
And our think tanks have devolved into the most
brain dead, You can't expect an idea like that to come from the
academia is a clown show.
It is. Yeah, everybody's in their navel,
Mm-hmm.
There are no grand narratives anymore. The humanities are in the trash. That's what the humanities.
And I don't know how we get that back, because you skip a generation with that, and how do you get that back?
Yeah, good question. I don't know.
Maybe one we save for our literacy podcast.
We also, I want to show you this, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
You haven't seen this. Can you see this?
Strange Rights. Is that about psilocybin?
No, it's not necessarily. But the subhead is New Religions for a Godless World. And it's by it's by a 30-year-old woman named Tara Isabella Burton. Who
Why does that name sound so familiar?
I don't understand what she's talking about half the time, because she's into the gaming world, right? And I've never played a video game. I don't have a Facebook account. I don't have a Twitter account. I don't want one. So she's like 30 years. All three of my children are older than that. I don't know what the hell she's talking about, but I recognize some of it about what's going on. See, the humanities require, it's literacy based, it's reading based,
Yes.
and it's solipsistic. It's disembodied, all right? Religious culture swings both ways. If you need, therapy, then the social aspect of a religious community furnishes that. But if you want intellectual stimulation, you have, in every major religious tradition in the world, you have the written, intellectually serious, moral reasoning aspect of religion. So religion is very flexible. That's why it appeals the way it does, because it crosses this boundary. The humanities don't and can't. The humanities are necessarily solipsistic. There's a ritual in the humanities, right? So when you lose literacy and you lose the sense of solipsistic, disembodied existence, that you can communicate with somebody who's been dead for 400 years, you can read Dante, whatever. When you lose that, it's gone, because there's no communal aspect to it really, except in faculties and in esoteric universities. So you're right. When the gossamer thread is broken, it's broken. But it's part of the erosion of literacy.
Yeah, I think it's a huge subject, and I think we should dedicate a whole podcast to it. And it's something we should be exploring as a society. We should be thinking about this so much more than we actually do, because the consequences of this are almost immeasurable. How do you have a law system if people can't read? How do you have
anything?
Yeah. Well, this is also the invitation for the zero-sum mentality to reinvade our lives. I mean, I think the best
black and white thinking, the childishness, the inability to grasp nuance.
I think the best essay I've written in the past couple of years, actually quite proud of it because there's some original thinking in it, was this essay called The Collapse of Reality, which is about the return of the zero sum. People don't realize this, but the Enlightenment actually is organized around a very simple idea, that it's possible to take the positive sum cooperative relationships that are organic to family and community and expand them through careful design of institutions to encompass a much larger us than just the family and the local town, right? And that's what the Enlightenment's based on. It's based on the idea that we can have positive sum, we can boost and we can refine and we can support positive sum relationships in large mass societies. That's what the Enlightenment is. That's what every American institution is
Scottish
based on.
Enlightenment, yeah.
Yeah, Scottish Enlightenment. We have the invisible hand. We have checks and balances. We have all of these dynamic equilibrium, right, ideas that show you that, you can get harmony from more than the sum of the parts, that not everything is a conflict, all right? That's going away. And what I tried to do in this article was deduce the reasons why the positive sum has deteriorated and we're back into the zero sum mentality, of which Donald Trump, of course, is the poster child of all time.
That was like a Darwinian saltation from civilization to spectacle that I would not have imagined could happen so quickly.
No, I mean, it took my breath away. But imagine a president of the United States saying, "Guy, why did those soldiers risk their lives and die? What was in it for them?" Can you imagine?
It would have been literally unimaginable until he said it. Literally unimaginable. I mean, I guess I suppose it would be imaginable, but it would be a spoof like Idiocracy.
Yeah.
I would never have believed that the things he said.
To me, the real question that does keep me up at night sometimes isn't about the decline of the gossamer thread of the humanities. It's the gossamer thread of the positive sum. Because if we lose that mentality, right, and we revert back to the dog eat dog, pseudo-Darwinian attitude, then not a single one of our institutions is sustainable. Not one. The idea of a loyal opposition, the idea of open debate, respect for truth, civility,
freedom of expression,
gone.
Academic freedom, tolerance of any kind.
And then it's a Lord of the Flies moment. It's one Lord of the Flies moment after another.
Well, that's exactly what I keep thinking, and people tell me, no, it'll be okay. But I think really that's just a matter of temperament, whether you're temperamentally optimistic or pessimistic. But I think there are a lot of reasons to be genuinely scared to death. I said this on our last podcast, that it feels like we've entered a new historic era. We're standing on the edge of a void. We have no idea what happens on the other side.
I have 5 grandchildren. I don't care about me so much. I'm fine. But I have 5 grandchildren. What kind of world? What kind of country? What kind of world? I'll just tell you a little joke, and then I'll go have lunch. You know the old joke about the optimist, the pessimist, and the engineer? You know this joke?
Tell me.
Yeah, the optimist thinks the glass is half full. The pessimist thinks the glass is half empty. The engineer thinks that the glass is twice as large as it needs to be for the purpose.
Yep.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Adam. It was
Take
lovely
care.
to see you. Really
Thank
lovely.
you, Adam. Thank you.
And your
Bye.
phone. Bye-bye, Whitney.
Okay, so that was absolutely fabulous.
That was an interesting conversation.
Yes, it was. It was. And I hope that we're going to be continuing with Adam. Okay, we got to get him back on.
That was brilliant.
Yes, it was.
Brilliant.
It was brilliant. It was brilliant. Okay, Claire, that brings us to the end of the pod. I'd like to thank Vivek. I'd like to say goodbye to you and to Claire. Claire, any last thoughts?
That was just a wonderful conversation. I think that our readers and our listeners will really, really be interested in that.
Okay, so we look forward to your comments in the comments section. Thank you for listening in, and it's ciao for now.